The lack of military-to-military communication between the U.S. and China increases the risk of misunderstanding and miscalculation in areas of tension such as the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. These are some of the reasons why the U.S. and China have different views on the status of Taiwan, a self-governing island that Beijing claims as part of its territory. The U.S. supports Taiwan's security and democracy, but does not officially recognize it as a sovereign state. China opposes any U.S. arms sales or official contacts with Taiwan, and has threatened to use force if Taiwan declares independence or resists unification. The U.S. and China have both increased their military presence and activities near Taiwan, raising the possibility of accidental or intentional clashes. The U.S. and China also have competing interests and claims in the South China Sea, a strategic waterway that carries about 1/3 of global trade. China claims almost the entire sea as its sovereign territory, based on its historical maps and artificial islands. The U.S. rejects China's claims as excessive and unlawful, and conducts freedom of navigation operations and exercises with its allies and partners in the region. China views these actions as provocative and infringing on its sovereignty and security. The U.S. and China have limited channels of communication to manage these disputes and prevent escalation. The main mechanism is the Defense Telephone Link, DTL, a hotline that connects senior military officials from both sides. However, the DTL has been underused and ineffective, due to political tensions, technical issues, and mistrust. According to a report by CRS, the DTL was used only 11 times between 2008 and the last call was in September 2021, after months of delays. Other forms of dialogue, such as high-level visits, joint exercises, and academic exchanges, have also been suspended or reduced since the lack of communication increases the chances of misperception, miscalculation, and escalation in a crisis situation. For example, in 2001, a U.S. spy plane collided with a Chinese fighter jet over the South China Sea, killing the Chinese pilot and forcing the U.S. plane to make an emergency landing on Hainan Island. The incident sparked a diplomatic standoff that lasted for 11 days, until both sides reached a compromise. During that time, the DTL was not used, and the communication was mainly through diplomatic channels. To reduce the risk of conflict, both sides need to improve their military-to-military communication and establish crisis management mechanisms. This was one of the main requests that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made during his visit to Beijing in June. However, China rejected this request, citing U.S. sanctions on its defense minister Li Shangfu as an obstacle. Blinken said he would keep working on restoring those communication channels. Military-to-military communication is not a sign of weakness or concession, but a way to enhance mutual understanding, trust, and stability. As analysts have pointed out, preventing a war between the U.S. and China relies on conversations between their militaries. This is especially important in times of heightened tension and competition. One of the main goals of Blinken's visit to Beijing was to restore direct communication between the U.S. and China militaries. This channel was cut off by China after the U.S. downed a Chinese spy balloon that flew over U.S. airspace in February. Blinken said he repeatedly raised this issue with his Chinese counterparts, including President Xi Jinping. He said it was vital to avoid misunderstandings and conflicts that could arise from military encounters in the region. However, he did not succeed in convincing China to reopen the dialogue. China did not agree to move forward with that, he said. One of the reasons for China's reluctance is that the U.S. has imposed sanctions on Li Shangfu, China's Minister of National Defense, for buying weapons from Russia. Blinken said he would keep working on restoring the military-to-military communication, but he did not offer any specific steps or timeline for doing so. One of the main reasons why military-to-military talks between China and the US have broken down is the US sanctions on China's new defense minister, General Li Shangfu. Li was sanctioned by the former Trump administration in 2018 for buying Russian weapons, including a Su-35 combat aircraft and a S-400 surface-to-air missile system. These weapons are considered to be a threat to US and its allies' security interests in the region. The sanctions prohibit Li from traveling to the US or doing business with US entities. This makes it difficult for him to engage in direct dialogue with his US counterpart, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Another reason why the military talks have stalled is the spy balloon incident that occurred earlier this year. In February 2023, a Chinese spy balloon was shot down by a US fighter jet off the coast of South Carolina. The US military recovered the electronic mechanism and key sensors from the balloon, which were believed to be used for intelligence gathering. The FBI is analyzing the wreckage to determine what information China had received before it was destroyed.